today, so please keep your questions short. We'll do the usual thing, but really the member states ask a lot of the time of the experts, and they still have a job to do, and as the crisis is not over, you can understand that they're quite busy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps start with an apology again for being late. We've just had 2.5 hours with our member states, and of course there's a lot of interest. I'll follow the same format as yesterday, if that's okay. We will give some sort of opening remarks, really as a summary of the situation as we see it here in Vienna, and then colleagues will give some presentations to give you a little technical detail, both on the situation on the site and on the radiological monitoring. So with that, there have been some positive developments in the last 24 hours, but the overall situation at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant remains very serious. Efforts to restore electrical power on the site continue. Off-site electrical power is being connected to the local substation for Unit 2 today. Work is continuing under difficult conditions to connect power from the substation to the reactor building. Seawater is still being injected into the reactor pressure vessels of Units 1, 2 and 3. Water injection is not needed for Unit 4 as the reactor is in outage. White smoke or vapour from Unit 3 is still being observed, but is less intense than on previous days. Spraying of the reactor building with water is in progress. Following an initial rise in pressure in the Unit 3 pressure vessel, plans were made to vent the vessel should it become necessary. However, from information recently received from NISA, they have decided not to vent as the vessel pressure has started to reduce, which is good news. The situation in the reactor spent fuel ponds is relatively stable, but is still of concern. Spraying of water into the pool of Units 4 started yesterday. The agency still lacks data on water levels and temperatures at the spent fuel pools at Units 1, 2, 3 and 4. A positive development is that cooling has been restored to the reactor pressure vessels in Units 5 and 6. Temperatures in the spent fuel pools at these two units, which had been rising in the last few days, have now fallen significantly to around 40 degrees centigrade. In fact, I think I heard the latest figures now 32, from a maximum of about 69 degrees yesterday. 2 diesel generators, one for each unit, are providing electricity. Radiation levels in major Japanese cities have not changed significantly since yesterday and remain below those which are dangerous to human health. The IAEA radiation monitoring team took additional measurements yesterday between Tokyo and locations up to 150 kilometers from the Fukushima site. Dose rates were typically a few microsieverts per hour, which compares to a typical background level of around 0.1 microsieverts per hour. From the measurements taken within the exclusion zone, no significant alpha radiation has been detected so far. This morning we received additional data from the agency's monitoring team, which indicated contamination on the ground at a location 50 to 70 kilometers from the Fukushima site. The team will make confirmatory measurements tomorrow at the same locations to help validate the initial results. Grass and other samples have also been taken by the team from various locations in the Fukushima prefecture for analysis. In the coming days, the IEA monitoring team plans to take measurements at the same locations monitored by the Japanese authorities. This will assist in the validation of measurements. The IEA is sending additional monitoring experts to Japan to supplement its capabilities in the field. Some results on the monitoring of foodstuffs have been made available by Japan to the IEA and FAO. We can confirm that measurements indicating that in some areas iodine 131 in milk and in freshly grown leafy vegetables such as spinach and spring onions is significantly above the levels set by Japan for restricting consumption of these food products. Finally, the Director General has, as you know, returned to Vienna, and he will be briefing the Board of Governors on Monday on the outcome of his visit to Tokyo. Thank you. Perhaps just before I forget, I mentioned yesterday some background information. We have available for you, if you haven't got them already, a short note which gives some basic information about radiation and radiation protection. We'd be happy in the week to supplement that with a presentation if we have time. But in case that's useful, we'll make these available to you. So with that, if I could ask Jim Lyons, a reactor safety expert, to provide some update on the site.
Did you go over the color chart?
No. You can.
All right. I think we've seen this. We're trying to present to you the same information every day, so you get an idea of where we are and what's changed. And again, on this chart, anything that's underlined is new information. So just to point out some new information, we are starting to see stable readings from the Unit 1 containment vessel pressure. These were changed. We had them in green yesterday. They've changed to yellow, but that was when the pressure in both the reactor pressure vessel and the containment vessel started to increase, and we thought there was going to be another venting process. So we consider those yellow, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in my slides. And then down here, for the units 3 and 4, that we have confirmation that they're putting water into those spent fuel pools, and those are looking a little bit better at this point. And then for the next slide, the good news is just Graham was saying, for the Unit 5 and Unit 6 that are being supplied by 2 diesel generators that are from the Unit 6 diesel generator complex, they're able to restore their residual heat removal system completely, in the sense that they have seawater cooling going to the heat exchangers to remove the heat. So they're able to remove the heat from the reactor vessel and from the spent fuel pool through the residual heat removal system, and that heat is transferred through a heat exchanger to the seawater system that then takes the heat out to sea. So what you see here is the levels in the reactor vessel are being maintained well above the fuel, about 2 meters above the fuel. In Unit 5, it's very steady. In Unit 6, it varies from maybe 1.5 to 2.5 meters. But it looks like they're able to control it around that 2 meter level. So that's good. That cooling has been restored to the to maintain the pressure in the reactor pressure vessel, and that they're able to restore cooling to the spent fuel pool. And to be also clear is that the water they're using to go through the reactor vessel and through the spent fuel pool are all pure water, so they haven't injected seawater into any of these units. It's all pure water that they've been able to use. They're normal systems. So if we can go to my slides. That's me. You don't need to, I think we know that. I put this slide together again when we thought that there was going to be a venting, and then I was able to, when we got our latest information, to revise the graph. In this graph, the red and the blue lines, I think I've made them heavy enough so you can see them. The red and the blue lines are the reactor vessel pressures, the two different readings, and as I was saying before, sometimes they can diverge, and then they tend to come back together. And then the green one is the containment vessel pressure. So I thought it would be interesting to show it all on one slide so that you can kind of see that they're tracking together. And then the diagram on the right, I think I showed this before about how they can vent through the safety relief valves to the torus, and then to relieve the pressure in the reactor pressure vessel. But right now, these two are pretty much at the same pressure. And then to relieve, and they do that to try and make sure they scrub out as much of the radioactivity as they can before they actually vent through the torus, if that's where they're venting. And I don't, that's one of the things that we'd have to find out if they were going to do it again. But so the good news is they didn't have to do that. They were able to control these pressures by backing off a little bit, reducing the amount of seawater they were pumping into the reactor vessel. And so that they were able to stabilize those pressures. And then this is just graphically what we were saying about the spent fuel pool in 5 and 6. The blue is the Unit 5 spent fuel pool, and the red is the Unit 6. And then I'm going to go through. There were no satellite photos of Daiichi today, Fukushima Daiichi today, because of the cloud cover. And in the past, we've talked about Fukushima Daini, the other unit that was of concern, and we've been telling you we're not really concerned. So I just wanted to give a real brief, just a few slides on the satellite photography that we have there. So this is whoops, I'm sorry, pushed the wrong button. This is kind of an overall picture. It was taken on the 12th of March, so after the tsunami. Units 1, 2, 3, and 4, they've got a waste disposal area here, low-level waste there. You can see there's the cooling, normal cooling comes in to this area, the seawater, and it's taken into these 3 bays, I guess, where they draw the seawater in. Then it's used within the plant and either discharged to the south this way or to the north that way. And this is typical of a plant, is that you separate the intake from the discharge so that you don't just take the hot water you just put out and put it right back in. So it helps to mix it. These are the comparative photos between, on the left, back in November, and you see these structures here that are now gone after the tsunami. But it looks like that beyond about this area, there wasn't significant damage to the plant. Again,